for the Citizens Campaign. I want to thank everyone for coming out this evening. We're really excited to be hosting tonight's program, Environmental Justice, Advocacy, and the Media. I also want to thank the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, who made tonight's program possible with their support. I want to thank Sustainable Jersey for being a co-sponsor this evening. And I do want to highlight on the board, we do have wireless this evening. Please tweet the quotes that you love. Tell everyone that you're here. We're on Facebook, so be part of the conversation on Twitter as well, using hashtag NJEnviroJustice. For those that are unfamiliar with the Citizens Campaign, which show of hands, how many people here are familiar with us? Okay, it's good, healthy acknowledgement. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization whose mission is to empower citizens to get results on the issues they care about. We provide tools and training to create a new empowered force of citizen problem solvers. And we really, over the years, have enjoyed our partnership with Sustainable Jersey. This is, I think, our third statewide conference, right? We're working with them. And Sustainable Jersey is also a nonprofit organization, and Randy will sure talk about them a little bit later. But they are doing great work to help communities go green, save money, and take steps to sustain their quality of life over the long term. So again, thank you to Sustainable Jersey, and welcome to the Citizens Campaign. Tonight's program is focused on showcasing innovative initiatives around the state that address the critical issues facing our cities and towns. From ensuring clean air to protecting our waterways to cleaning up contaminated sites and brownfields, tonight's keynote and panel are really on the front lines of getting things done. But before we get to those really pressing issues, I want to talk briefly about the importance of media coverage for environmental justice and the role that each of you can play tonight and tomorrow. The Citizens Campaign focuses on 5 powerful roles that any citizen can take in their community: citizen legislator, community leader, serving on an appointed board or commission like a planning board, getting involved in local political parties, or finally, becoming a citizen journalist. So if you visit our website, this is a quick screen grab. We offer these 5 classes, and citizen journalism is one, and we also have a citizen journalism and environmental advocacy online class that you can take. And you may be wondering, why citizen journalism? How is that a powerful role? Because knowledge is power. For the public to begin to understand how our communities are negatively impacted by pollution or old industrial sites, someone needs to tell the story of what is happening there. The media can help frame the issues in the bigger picture. It's not just one block that's flooding, but maybe it's a whole city that's underwater when it rains. And it's not just one town's polluted river, but that's a waterway that's going to hurt other communities. We're all in this together, and it's the media that can help drive that story and can start educating the public. It also can help build a new pool of community advocates for environmental justice. We want to share good news and good deeds that work. We want to also admonish the people who are doing bad and when they're polluting the water. This way we can start building community and bringing people together. And then that way it will have, as you get the coverage out there, as you start reporting the news of what's happening, it creates a snowball effect. You'll get more people involved and more people reporting what's happening. And finally, the media can be used to hold officials accountable. As we like to say, sunshine is the best disinfectant. So how can you be a citizen journalist? Here's a Saul Kerzin. He lives in Roselle Park. He had, didn't really think his local paper covered his small community of about 13,000 people very well. He ran a civic association. He's like, I really want to keep my community informed of what's happening. So using WordPress, he just got a website up. At first, he called it a monthly magazine. He published monthly. Now he has a full-time job, but now he publishes 5 times a day. He is the go-to source for community news, election coverage. He interviews all the candidates running for office, and he's really the newspaper of record for his community. And it's just one citizen who felt committed to empowering his neighbors with news and information. Here's Justin Osceola. How many of you follow Jersey Shore Hurricane News? Maybe you've seen it. Well, he has 200,000 followers. And again, he has a full-time job. This is not his profession. He's an urban planner, so maybe you've seen him at a planning meeting. Justin started a Facebook page and a Twitter account to cover breaking weather news, other breaking stories in the Jersey Shore. And because of his coverage just being on target, accurate, and in real time, he's leveraged it to over 200,000 followers. And again, that's just one person who had the commitment and the drive to really bring the community together online. And another way that I like to talk about citizen journalism is data journalism and mapping. And here's what Sustainable Jersey City did. They created a green map. And, you know, some people be like, that's not journalism. But I really do think it is. Because a map can tell a story of what's there, but also what's not there. You know, here they're taking the time to map out where are the bike routes, where are access to healthy food, you know, where are the open spaces for recreation, how are those positioned next to schools. You really can start seeing several news stories emerging just from a simple data map. So that's what one group did. Now, if you're ready by the end of today to follow in Justin and Saul's footsteps and be a citizen journalism, I just wanted to give you some quick tips for success. The first is to make sure that whatever you write or whatever you put out there on the internet, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, on your website, that it's accurate. Accuracy can make or break you. I just heard the quote, you know, trust is hard to build, but it's easy to lose. You have one bad fact out there, and no one's going to go back to your site, or no one's going to go back to your Twitter feed or re-forward it. So you really want to make sure, if you are, especially with environmental justice issues, that you're reporting actual facts of what's happening. You also want to try to be thorough. This is getting sort of the 360 view of what's happening in this story, not just one frame, you know, not just one little section of it, but the full picture, so that the public can really get a sense of what's happening, and you can show the different perspectives and trust your audience to make the right judgments. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Fairness. This is just not showing particular, favoritism towards one side or another, but really trying to stay down the road in the middle. And independence sort of goes along with that, but that's trying not to be partisan or affiliated with a political party. Try to be cognizant of who you're affiliating with different groups. They're going to have different biases when you're reporting. And objectivity. Now, all this said, some people will be like, well, what about opinion pieces or op-eds? Those are completely fine, and we encourage that. I consider that citizen journalism, too. Just make sure that they're labeled as such. Don't try to publish something that's an opinion piece and then try to write it off as a hard news story. You know, respect your audience and make sure they know what you're doing. And with editorials or opinion pages, it's still great to root them in fact. You still want to win people over with your arguments, and so again, it's really important to have those accurate facts. So while your passion may be carrying through, it's the facts at the end of the day that might win your audience over. So if you're ready to step off the sidelines and become a citizen journalist by the end of tonight's program, after you hear these great speakers talking about all the important issues happening in our communities, I hope you're ready to go out there and start reporting them and tell the masses about how people can solve these issues. You were handed this little card when you walked in or registered. If you fill this out, we'll give you this book, Shining Light in Dark Spaces, written by the editor of PattersonPress.com, Joe Malanconico, and it's about how to cover municipal government. So I encourage you all to fill that out and turn that in and become citizen journalists. So now it's my pleasure to switch gears a little bit and introduce our first speaker of the night, Anna Baptista. Anna was the Director of Environmental and Planning Programs at the Ironbound Community Corporation, where she oversaw a wide range of environmental justice, community development, and land use planning projects in Newark. And I believe starting today you have am I allowed to announce it? Yeah. She has a new role starting today. She is the Director of Environmental Programs at the Regional Planning Association in New York City. So everyone, please give a warm welcome to Anna Baptista.
She's going to pull up a PowerPoint with a few slides. So today was my first day at my new job, and I miss Ironbound already terribly. I see some friendly faces in the room. And you have to understand that I grew up in the Ironbound. So this is the community that I grew up in, that my family still resides in, and so it's very much a part of who I am and my formation, both as a professional, as an academic, and so it means a lot to me. So to be part of this community, so I've had the privilege to work in the community alongside residents for so many years on environmental justice issues. So when I got the request to do a talk about EJ, I it's a great opportunity because I don't think enough people know about environmental justice issues in the state. But it's also an interesting approach, thinking about the media and how the media can be a tool and an ally for environmental justice. Because I think what Heather said is very important. You know, growing up in these communities, and you'll see lots of pictures here from the neighborhood, from Newark, and some of them, you know, that I was part of as a young person. Growing up in some of these places that have a lot of environmental degradation, you often wonder, you know, why is it like this? Why are things like this? Why is it that when I go to, you know, the neighborhood next door, or the town, or the city further away, it doesn't look like this. It doesn't feel like this. And it feels, you know, you have a sense of injustice even as a child of what that feels like and what that sense is. And when we do environmental justice tours, when we do these tours in the Ironbound, and also PJ communities do these tours, and they ask, why do you do these tours? And one reason to do it is because environmental injustice is America's dirty little secret. You know, I can tell you while you're in the room. It's okay. So, you know, I thought I'd start by thinking about all the different dimensions of environmental justice and sort of peeling back some of the layers of environmental injustice and looking at what that really means in our society. Because oftentimes we stay at the surface, and certainly when the media is reporting on some of these stories, they can only get so far in a story. But it's important to sort of understand, once you get past the initial layer, you know, there's this horrible thing coming to the community, let's not fight it. What's underneath that? What's driving that? What is the source and the structure that makes that possible? And I start with the definition of environmental justice, the positive version. What does it mean? What does it look like to have environmental justice? And I love, this is Bunyan Bryant, who's an academic at the University of Michigan, and I love his paraphrasing of it, which is people realizing their highest potential, personal empowerment, and democratic decision-making. So environmental justice, the realization of environmental justice means that we really face the structural issues that cause inequality in our society. So that means material inequality, power relations, and representation and voice. And these are just little shortcuts for, you know, different elements of justice or injustice. You can think about sort of the mirror opposites. There's what we talk about often in the EJ communities as distributive forms of injustice. In other words, disproportionate amounts of burdens or pollution. And that's often how we hear about environmental injustice. Communities like Newark or Camden or Trenton or you know, communities in the South Bronx, all over the country, all over the world, that are largely low income and people of color. And many of those communities have what we call disproportionate amounts of pollution or environmental burdens. And they come in lots of different forms, whether that's light from brownfields or polluting industries or concentration of refineries or chemical companies. And we see a lot of the media, you know, Louisiana's cancer corridor, or you know, Newark's very own chemical corridor, or the refinery corridor in Linden. So distributive justice is sort of, you know, how we think about not just the burdens, but also the benefits. People also don't remember distributed means that you also, those communities also have disproportionate amounts of lack of environmental amenities, parks and green spaces, and access to healthy food, and access to transit, and so those are that's the other flip side of the burden piece. So that's the distributed part. The procedural part, is access to decision making, and it's a lot of the decision making processes. People often think of it as sort of public hearings or public participation processes, but it can actually go deeper than that to our representative democracy, about how people have voice and their decision making that affects their lives. So it's not just public meetings or hearings. And then there's structural justice, which is a lot harder to define and a lot harder to talk about, but in fact is the root of a lot of different types of inequality: economic inequality, environmental inequality, and they're embedded in the patterns of our society. It's about access to housing and economic empowerment and all sorts of issues that we've inherited over long periods of time and are products of lots of different kinds of systems. So I'm going to give you some examples. I'm afraid I'm getting a little too wonky. Just as distribution. Oftentimes we see in our communities, like Newark, for example, we have lots of fights over siting. Every year, every month, every week, there are facilities that want to locate in our community, in a community that's largely of low income and people of color. And we ask, how can this be? It's not just that it's intentional racism, although there are cases of intentional racist acts that create facility siting in these communities. But the concentration of these facilities, the concentration of these burdens, this unequal distribution of pollution has to be looked at also from the root. What has created the devalued land that gives rise to these facilities being attracted and concentrating there. So, a lot of the times in the EJ movement, we spend a lot of time on permitting and environmental management systems and environmental regulatory systems, fighting about how things get permitted, how things get cited. But it goes beyond that because, we also have to look at land use zoning. How do municipalities make choices about how they parse out their land uses? Why is it that Short Hills has no industrial zones, and in Newark we zone for heavy industry, I-3, and we allow for everything all the way up to refineries and nuclear power plants. So there's a wide range of decisions and ways that we structure those choices, right? And the quote on the bottom really gets to the heart of this, because for now more than a decade, maybe more than 2 decades, environmental justice folks have been saying, can we break apart the system of environmental regulation that permits pollution in these same communities over and over and over again, facility by facility, smokestack by smokestack? Can we take a more holistic, cumulative approach? Can we take a more precautionary approach so that we really change the structure of distribution of these ponds? So here's an example of what environmental injustice looks like, and I know Dr. Sheets will talk about, air pollution in particular. But there's also this argument that I wanted to put out there because I see it in the media. It's just the market. The land is cheap, the infrastructure is there. It just makes sense, and there's going to be winners and losers. But I want to challenge that thinking a little bit, and I want folks to really question when they see that argument made. The fact that where someone lives, the zip code where you live, determines how long you will live in this country. That's a disgrace. That's something we should be ashamed of, not something that it should just be brushed off as economic. And part of the reason that happens, that distribution happens in that way, is not coincidental. It's in fact based on a lot of patterns of urban land use, historic patterns of housing, how we distribute housing, who had access to certain types of housing, how we build a transportation infrastructure in this country, how we build public housing in this country, and things like racialized redlining policies, housing discrimination. There's a whole set of policies that were state-sanctioned policies all the way up until the 1970s. Today, probably still rampant in our quote-unquote free market system that discriminated against people having a choice about where they live and where they could locate. And at the same time, an environmental regulatory system that really picked apart our environment in a way that made it very difficult to have a comprehensive view of environmental pollution. So you put all those things together with deindustrialization, and you've got New Jersey. And coincidentally, the red, where you have the highest risk, this is for diesel. This one is diesel pollution, and it's the cancer risk, maybe? Yeah, the diesel cancer risk that's predicted. And you see that the urban corridor from Newark and Stratton and Hampton are the highest risk areas. Distribution of environmental justice as process. This is one that drives me crazy, and I drive a lot of environmental justice folks crazy. Because the first thing a state will do, and they did this starting with the EJ executive order, was they said, well, we have a problem, environmental injustice. We see it all across the country. So what we're going to do is we're going to write these laws. We're going to say we're going to include and involve communities that are impacted. We're going to have more processes, more public participation, more meetings. Many times the environmental justice laws that were passed, the few that were passed in states like New York, said we're going to add a provision for more public review of permits. So that's usually the first step that a lot of states take to intervene on environmental justice issues. But it never quite makes it past the extra meetings. It never really gets to the point where those meetings turn into action and actual power and redistribution of power at the decision-making table. So, as Bob Bullard would say, we don't want to be on the menu. We don't want to just be at the table. Like, we want to eat. We want to order from the menu. And we want to be able to, make the terms of some of that decision-making that happens at the table. And a perfect example of this is the state of New Jersey, Department of Environmental Protection. In the last couple of years has decided that they're going to open up a lot of rulemaking about environmental laws. And the way they're going to do that is through stakeholder processes. And they're going to invite stakeholders from different sectors, the industry, the community, the nonprofit. So all the different sectors get representation at the table. They sit around. They can hammer out their differences around what they think the rules should be. And in the end, we should have this big recommendations that need to be considered. The problem with that formula is that requires a monthly meeting in Trenton. Okay? That requires the entire day, lots of technical review, lots of time, and it also says usually there's only one or two community groups at the table, and there's usually 5 or 6 industry people who's like that's their full-time job, and they got paid as consultants to do that. That's not just that day, but probably for the whole year, 2 years. So, and so you're often outnumbered. There's no recognition of power imbalances in the structuring of stakeholder processes. There's no accounting for different levels of access to information or resources. So even just because you create a process that on its face looks like it's equal doesn't mean fair, right? So deepening the way we think about creating more access, more transparency, and also more accountability to decision making. That is really what we need to get to. And this is a great quote, we go to meetings and meetings and meetings and just get meeting to death, And communities, and I'm always shocked, people are always disappointed. We have a community meeting and 20 people show up. I'm always shocked 20 people showed up. I mean, they spent probably 20, 30 years banging their head against going to those same meetings with absolutely no results. And people are smart. community people are smart. They know that meetings don't result in the actions. They don't have access to decision-making power through that avenue. So, you know, people are going to use their time wisely, and it's always amazes me that people still continue to try to engage, even though they're not being engaged at a high level. Just as a structural, and this is where, you know, we really get deep into like the, you know, the root causes of environmental inequality. You know, what is driving so much of what we see in EG communities are social, political, and economic processes that lead to this uneven distribution. But it's also the development of racially stratified spaces. And let's talk about race right up front, because white privilege and race are a foundational issue in how our communities were developed, right? Where you have your house or where you were allowed to buy a house was largely based on your race, you know, up until, you know, not too long ago in this country. And where you can buy your house and where you can raise your kids and where you can educate them and the quality of that education, all of that is linked, right, in a series of things that lead to uneven access to educational opportunities, social networks, employment. All of these things have a cyclical effect. And the same thing has happened with our cities. You know, this pattern of disinvestment and white flight that we hear about that happened out in the suburbs that really shrunk the tax base of our cities, led to a lot of blight, destabilization of manufacturing. There's fewer and fewer jobs, fewer quality jobs. You know, you add up all those things, and you can see how we created these zones, these dumping grounds, these places where we pushed people, you know, the disenfranchised, and also all the stuff we don't want to deal with: garbage, prisons, sewage treatment. It's all of society's underbelly that we don't want to deal with. We push it out, and we push it into EJ communities. So, you know, my thing is, it took, you know, 150, 200 years of state action to create these racialized spaces. So it's going to take really affirmative, progressive state intervention to help undo them. And it won't be easy and it won't be overnight. But the more we can recognize those patterns in our society and try to break them down and try to intervene in them in really affirmative, aggressive ways, I think the more we can get to the heart of what is environmental injustice. So, you know, we will, not just I think we will keep fighting the incinerators, animal waste purveyors. You know, every week there's, you know, chicken processing plants, whatever it is that society wants to put somewhere. Those fights one by one, but we have to work together as allies to find a solution so that those things either don't have to exist anywhere, so it's not in anyone's backyard. You know, can we create a society where we don't have environmental burdens that we can dump continually here or in other parts of the world? So it's a much deeper question, right? And it's going to take more than just the communities that are getting dumped on to answer it. So there's a lot of issues, right? This procedural, distributive, structural, and I want to encourage folks to break open their thinking about how they can be a part of some of the solution making. Certainly media can be a very powerful ally, but mostly it's the citizens and the residents, the communities that can be in alliance and coalition with the communities that are impacted, because places like Newark don't exist without places like Shore Hill. They coexist, and the more folks in those communities realize how interdependent they are, the better we can get at the root causes of these problems. So, you know, one of the things is, you know, trying to create new forms of access to information, democratic decision making. You know, how do we break from the regular mold of public hearings to maybe more citizen advisory groups? I know cities like, you know, all over the world, but even in the U.S. are looking at citizen budgeting. You know, lots of different ways to peel apart how you make decisions at the community level. For distributive justice, there's a lot of need to look at a cumulative approach, a very different approach to environmental regulation. And my belief is that for structural justice to be looked at, we really need to take a more life cycle precautionary approach to the world, because we can't keep finding places to dump all of our unwanted things. So really specific to New Jersey, because there's a lot going on in New Jersey, and I think New Jersey is an amazing testing ground for what can be done, especially in the biggest times of stress and need, when we can get the most innovative and the most creative and the most scrappy, right? New Jersey is a great place for that. So there's this environmental justice legislation that's been around kind of, under the radar. Senator Weinberg proposed it several years ago, and it sort of resurfaced with Ray Spencer last year. And it's got a lot of potential, to at least start to address some of these issues in permitting and the DEP, but across the state, how we allocate resources across lots of different state agencies. So one thing you can do is you can help us push and gain support for these bills. I mean, the chances of an environmental justice bill getting to the legislature are pretty slim. I'm not going to lie to you, but one of the goals is to build allies and to build coalitions and to also build champions and advocates, because that's what we also lack. Unfortunately, many of the legislators that represent the communities that are most impacted are some of the worst records on the environment, and they don't realize how, or they're not accountable to how those things affect their constituents. So we really do need allies in other parts of the state to work with us. We have a cumulative impact ordinance that the city of Newark is going to be the first to test out, that really looks at land use planning and zoning, and how cities can stake a claim in the ground about what can and can't go in the communities around these sort of more noxious uses. Supporting local grassroots efforts, like I said, community groups, grassroots impacted communities need friends, they need allies, and they need people that can help shine a light on what's going on in our collective backyard. DEP, the state has this amazing tool, this cumulative impact tool. How many people here know that DEP has developed state-of-the-art tools? Yeah? Well, not very many of you, and let me tell you why. Because for now 5 years, maybe 4 or 5 years, they've refused to release it. So the people, the people inside DEP actually developed a tool we like. Right there, that's shocking. It's like it's a tool that looks at all these existing data on environmental indicators and demographics in the state, and it can tell you, like, these are the areas that are high risk. None of it is rocket science. I mean, you're not going to look at a map and be shocked at what they find. So I was like, oh, duh, Camden and Newark are, highly impacted. But it's groundbreaking in the sense that DEP lays it all out there. Because all the environmental data that they do have, and they have a very, scientifically rigorous tool. And we say, use this. Use it for decision making. Use it for permitting. Use it to target resources. Let the public see it so that they can use it. And they refuse to put it out in the public. So we've only gotten glimpses of it. We've had presentations inside of Herald of the State, but never have seen the light of day in the public. So that's another key thing. And I encourage all of you to learn more about what's happening here in New Jersey around environmental justice. The first link is a Tumblr site, and all the pictures that you see in here are on that Tumblr site. The Iron Mountain Community Corporation, where I work, has started to digitize many of their archives around environmental justice. So there's great photos there and lots of documentation on the EJ history in Newark. The Coalition for Healthy Ports is a multi-stakeholder coalition. It's the type of coalition that can get at structural change, because it's labor, environment, community, EJ, faith-based groups coming together to fight a very big adversary called the Port Authority. And something as small as the global goods logistics movement in the country. So it's not a small endeavor, so it takes a large coalition of people. That's the kind of thing that you need. And then EJ, New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance, which I'm a member of, and Nikki is a member of, and Molly and Peter, lots of folks in this room are members of, and we're always looking for more members. So check out the website and see if you'd like to join with us in this cause. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was fabulous. It's now my pleasure to call up our panel. You guys can take your seats. And we have Randy Solomon from Sustainable Jersey will be moderating and introducing everyone. Randy is the co-founder of Sustainable Jersey, and he's a senior advisor at the Municipal Land Use Center at TCNJ, or the College of New Jersey. He has tons of experience as a policy advisor on sustainable issues to different state agencies, the state on land use and energy policy, and he's a great guy.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here. I want to note that this year, 2014, is a pretty auspicious year in terms of civil rights and also environmental justice. It's the 60th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, landmark, seminal social justice piece of legislation. It's the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act. And it's also the 20th anniversary of the federal government's environmental justice executive order. And this was the first real major, not piece of legislation, it's an executive order, but time that the federal government really recognized environmental justice issues and demanded, how shall I say this, they demanded that all federal agencies shall pay lip service to environmental justice before they make their decisions. But I just want to note that, as Anna mentioned, the lip service part is the easiest piece to get, but it's still pretty hard. And you have to get to that stage before you can get to the actual decision making and sort of actually having power part of it. So it's good that we're here today to talk about these issues. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then I'm going to give a couple of remarks on my own. So first off, we have Dr. Nikki Sheets down at the end. And Dr. Sheets is the director of the Center for the Urban Environment at the Watson Institute for Public Policy at Thomas Edison State College in Trenton. He's a member of the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance, where he's been rabble-rousing since its inception in 2003. And he's also a member of New Jersey's Clean Air Council. He participates on a number of federal government advisory task forces, and he received his PhD from the Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences at Harvard, so he's a natural scientist to begin with. And he also serves and participates and is a leader on Sustainable Jersey's Diversity and Equity Task Force, trying to help develop best practices for municipalities. In the middle, we have Andy Kricken, who's the Executive Director and Chief Engineer of the Camden County Municipal Utilities Authority. He might take some objection to Anna's characterization of what he does as being sort of the underbelly of society, but it is certainly something that's very important and necessary. We often don't think about what happens when, we flush our toilet or run the faucet or where wastewater goes from our streets. And if we weren't thinking about that, we would all be exposed to it in a much worse condition. And his regional sewer system services over 5,000 customers. He's a graduate of Princeton University. He's got a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering, and he also recently received EPA's Environmental Quality Award and was the 2012 recipient of the Praxis Award for Professional Ethics. So, thank you. To his right, we have Robert Spiegel, and he is the executive director and the founder of the Edison Wetlands Association. And they serve the lower Raritan River watershed of central New Jersey. They've worked on a number of environmental justice and environmental issues in the region. They are responsible for helping lead cleanups of 75 different toxic waste sites throughout the region. One of their big accomplishments was preserving the Triple C Ranch, and they've developed that into an environmental education destination for Middlesex County. And Mr. Spiegel has been honored by both the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the New Jersey State Legislature, among others. And he's been recognized by numerous bodies for his leadership. And he was featured in the 2011 NJN PBS documentary, Rescuing a River, and the 2011 HBO documentary, Man vs. Ford. So thank you all for coming, and I look forward to your remarks, as I'm sure does everybody. First off, though, before we get too much farther, I wanted to get a sense of who's here. The topic is both environmental justice, but it's also advocacy in the media. And there's a lot of different ways that people can come at these issues. So how many people here are activists? They're environmental activists, and they want to advance their issues. Great. How many people here are sort of on this journalism side? They believe they want to do a better job of getting information out there, building journalistic institutions. Great. And how many people are here for some other reason? And if you raise your hands, I know what those other reasons are. There's a foundation here. There's some academics here. As Heather said, in a democracy, you need knowledge and citizen engagement to have power and to address issues. And people who tend to have money and power, if they're left to their own devices, they will do what benefits them. And so the only way that the fruits and the benefits of democracy manifest is if a large number of people in the citizenry know what's going on and have some kind of capacity to engage on those issues. The DEP example of the cumulative impacts tool that Ana Baptista mentioned is a classic example of that. If people know about those issues and know about those cumulative impacts, they're much more likely to get riled up about it and act on it. And if they don't know about it, they're less likely to get riled up and act on it. So knowledge is a power. And in New Jersey, in particular, we're in a news desert. I think a lot of people have heard the term a food desert. So in a lot of underserved communities, they don't have access to fresh, healthy food. There's not the best variety of grocery stores. All of New Jersey is a media desert. We are in the shadow of New York and Philadelphia. Major television coverage is always secondary to New York City and Philadelphia. And then at the local level, since the internet, the news media in general is transforming. And so we have much less local news than we used to. Now we can get national news and international news quick and easy and free because there's so many people competing with that same information, and you can get that information from anywhere in the world through news aggregators like Google and Yahoo. But local news is drying up, unfortunately. And so Citizens Campaign, among many others, are really trying to push to figure out what is the new way to advance citizen journalism, local news reporting, so that a lot of these issues that we've been talking about and we're going to talk more about have the ability to be out in the community so that we can educate people about them and so that democracy can function. In the town where I live, Highland Park, we recently had a Mount Laurel builder's remedy. And I don't know if people know what Mount Laurel is, but basically we've got a law in the state of New Jersey that says if your town isn't doing what the state thinks it should do to support affordable housing, a developer can come in and sue you, break your zoning, and force you to accept a big development of which a small percentage will be affordable. And that's how you'll get your affordable housing. No one in Highland Park knew about this. We did not know that we were not in compliance with the Mount Laurel court decision. And then when the developer sued us to break our zoning and force in a development, nobody had any idea what was going on. And then when it ultimately got resolved in the courts and a deal was struck, no one knew what that deal was. There was no real way to get input. That's because we don't have a newspaper. And so that's a whole issue that manifested, came, and then went without anyone really knowing what happened. And that exists to this day. So there are numerous issues that need exposure if they're going to have good outcomes. And environmental justice issues in particular are key because we're talking about populations of people that generally don't have the most power. They're not insiders. And so again, unless people have information, they're not, and a way to engage, they're not going to win on these issues. As mentioned, I direct an organization called Sustainable Jersey, and Sustainable Jersey has been active on environmental justice issues, and I'd say in general, Sustainable Jersey is an organization that looks to empower communities to address a host of sustainability, environmental, and social issues. And so we feel that we're part of building the base of citizen engagement to get exposure on these issues and broaden the conversation. But in particular, we also address a lot of diversity issues specifically. So in Sustainable Jersey, we come up with best practices that we think municipalities can and should implement. One of those is diversity on boards and commissions. So doing an audit of your municipality and seeing on all the appointed and elected boards and commissions, do those commissions reflect the diversity of your community or not? Or is it all one neighborhood or all one race of people, that not reflecting the full diversity? We have a new slate of brownfields actions that help municipalities identify and clean up brownfields. And we have a diversity and equity task force that has been working to try to come up with best practices on cumulative impacts. And we, like everybody else, have sort of been waiting for the DEP to release their cumulative impacts tool. And at a certain point, I think people just have to say, well, if they don't do it, most of the information that they've got is public information, and it's not rocket science to layer it and compile it and just make that tool ourselves. So at a certain point, we'll stop waiting and we'll just make the tool. But we want to give best practices to municipalities on cumulative impact assessment. So there are a number of other things in Sustainable Jersey, and I would say that's a good place to look if you want some pointers. And I would also say that getting involved in Sustainable Jersey in your town, and over 400 New Jersey municipalities, which is the vast majority of municipalities, are now participating in Sustainable Jersey. And we ask that municipalities, they have to have a green team or a sustainability commission to be in Sustainable Jersey, and that's a way that local citizens can engage on that decision making. So you can ask to be on your local green team. So finally, I'm going to wrap up before I turn it over to the panelists. And I'm just going to note that Sustainable Jersey is going to be launching a new initiative that's focused on what municipalities can do to better engage with citizens. We'll be developing tools that municipalities can employ, like web tools, governance tools, Government 2.0, sort of, which is like social media and different ways that you can use, again, web tools to get input from the public on different decisions that are being made, and also push information out to citizens. So if you're interested in that and helping to shape those recommendations for municipalities, let me know. And that's definitely something I hope we would work with Citizens Campaign on. So look for that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first panelist, Dr. Nikki Sheets. Minutes? And I'll give you the 1 minute song. Lobby for 6.
I'll give you one of my minutes if you need to.
Yeah, Randy, I'm a veteran at this. When I came in, whoever was at the table, I said, Renee, can I have an extra minute? She said, yes, I can give you a minute. She did. Okay. So my name is Nikki Sheets. I'm director of the Center for Urban Environment. I'm going to talk fast. I'm also a member of the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance. I define the mission of my center as supporting the EJ community on both the state and national level. And the New Jersey EJ Alliance is the only statewide organization in New Jersey that focuses on EJ issues, and the only statewide environmental organization, although we are well integrated, and as you can see, we have 5 or 6 members here, We're still the only statewide environmental organization in which a majority of both its membership and leadership are people of color. And I've been tasked to talk about air pollution and EJ. So I'm going to talk about one particular type of air pollution, no pun intended, and it is called particulate matter air pollution. And it's just what it sounds like. These are small particles, and the problem is they kill. So I'm talking about fine particulate matter air pollution. Fine refers to the size of the particle. And it's either, you see another name for it, fine particulate matter or PM 2.5. 2.5 refers to the size of the particle. So these are all airborne particles, either solid or liquid, that are less than 2.5 microns in diameter. Just what they sound like, small particles in the air, and we breathe them in. You're breathing them in right now. You can't stop it. They're ubiquitous. And the problem is, the reason that size is important is that these particles are small enough to penetrate deep into your lungs. And they kill you. 200,000, it's been estimated, this is a MIT report paper that came out last year, and they estimate that it causes 200,000 premature deaths in the United States every year. Let me say that again. In the United States, these particles have been estimated to cause 200,000 premature deaths every year. So think how many more people are making sick. They're causing that many deaths. The problem with the particles, two things, that they're physically in your lungs, and the second is a toxic composition. It's almost like delivering a little piece of poison in your body. And I have the composition there, which all I really want to say about that is it's toxic. More importantly, what are the sources? Well, the sources is anything that burns, combustion. That's where these particles are coming from. And so anywhere where you see a smokestack is probably emitting fine particulate matter. Boilers, of course, burning leaves, and very important in urban areas, cars, trucks, buses. Trucks and buses, diesel engines produce more of the particulate matter than cars do. So I have two questions there for you. One is diesel PM more deadly than PM from other sources? And the answer is most scientists would say probably yes, for two reasons. One is that the particles are small, even smaller, most of them even smaller than the fine particulate matter I've talked about. They go into a size category called ultrafine particulate matter, 0.1 microns in diameter. So these particles are small enough to enter your bloodstream and go throughout your body. And the other reason why it's probably more toxic, diesel PM is because there are more toxic attached to it. And Anna referred to cancer risk, and maybe during the question and answer session, we can talk a little bit more about that. And here's a question, I'm setting you up for something here that I really want to show you. Here's a question setting you up for this. Why is fine PM an environmental justice issue? And I'm setting you up for this because I've shown this figure all around the country, right? I've become known for showing this figure. Here is the cumulative impacts tool that Anna talked about and Randy talked about. Right, this is the tool that DEP developed, partly because we harassed them so much. And Randy, we're not waiting for it anymore. We've given up. What happened was they released this part because we harassed them when the last administration left, and we downloaded it right away. And this is 2009 data, and I'll explain in a minute. And it's been developed further, but the further development has not been released, and we've given up. We don't think it's going to be released. So that's why we have developed a municipal ordinance. That's why we're talking about the statewide ordinance, because we have to, we have to do this. We have to do something on our own about this, basically. So what's it telling us? Well, cumulative impacts, multiple pollutants from multiple sources of pollution. And this tool has estimated the amount of cumulative impacts in every neighborhood in New Jersey. Think about it as an estimate of the amount of pollution in every neighborhood in New Jersey. So what's the graph telling you? Well, you have two of them. Right, up top, you have percent minority, we say percent people of color. The bottom, percent poverty. So what this does is it graphs the amount of pollution in neighborhoods in New Jersey against race and income. Right? The y-axis is pollution. The x-axis, that one is percent people of color. This one, percent poverty. And what happens to the amount of pollution as the number of people of color in the neighborhood increases and the number of poor people? It goes up, right? It's almost a straight line relationship. Now I got to sit down in a minute. I can say a whole lot about this. I'll just say two things. And I refer to the environmental justice hides things. Well, you know, I come to say, because look, the pollution are in communities of color and poor neighborhoods, right? And this goes against everything we say we stand for. If you're black, you have a higher chance of having more pollution if you're white. If you're poor of any color, you have a higher chance of having more pollution than if you have money. And I think what this tells us, or the real message here, is that I think this is what makes our system, our environmental system, sustainable for everyone else but people of color and poor people. This is what lets white neighborhoods, middle class white neighborhoods, upper class white neighborhoods be all right for our environmental system. Because all the bad stuff is going to communities of color and poor communities. So that's what Adam talks about hidden environmental justice. This makes it sustainable for everyone else, but of course it's not sustainable for people of color and poor people. It's killing them and making them sick. And you know, we need sewage plants, just like we don't have a problem. I'm glad Andy has a sewage plant. I contribute to the sewage. But our problem is that the sewage plants and other things are disproportionate in communities of color and poor communities. And air pollution is contributing to that. So here are the 9 factors that the 9 indicators I just showed you, that they graph. And you notice that NATA National Air Toxic Assessment diesel is one of them, air pollution, particulate air pollution, traffic, right, all traffic trucks, air pollution again, benzene, again, is a different kind of air pollution. So air pollution is contributing to that kind of disproportionate impact on communities of color and poor communities. Right? And those are the environmental justice, right? Those are the environmental justice communities. When we say environmental justice community, we mean communities of color and poor communities. I'm at -1. So all I'm going to say about this is that there are policy recommendations that we have developed to reduce air pollution, not only for people of color and poor people, but for everybody. Because guess what? Air pollution travels, and it's killing other people besides people of color and poor people. And it's killing us at disproportionately high rates, but it's killing everybody. And maybe during question and answer, we can talk about some of the policy recommendations. Yep. Thank you for that minute.
I gave you 2.
2.
Next up is Andy Cricken from Camden County Municipal Utilities Authority.
Let's start the clock yet, menu. Okay. Thanks. Hi, Andy Cricken with the Camden County MUA. I'd like to thank Renee for the invitation. I appreciate the opportunity. I am a purveyor of wastewater treatment plant and operator of wastewater treatment plant, and my talk is about why environmental justice should be an essential best management practice for any clean water utility in an economic distressed community. So wastewater management have a tremendous challenge, but challenge is the flip side of, or opportunity is the flip side of challenge. We also have an opportunity, and I would say a moral obligation to improve things. There are many ways that we can do it. Obviously, optimizing water quality, that's our ballot, it's our reason for being. It can also minimize odors because we can have a significant adverse impact if we don't pay attention to that. We can achieve cost efficiencies to reduce rates, obviously, which help everyone, but economic distressed communities even more so. And of course, we can also reduce carbon footprint and take other green initiatives. These challenges and opportunities are especially prevalent in an economic distressed city like Camden. And here's, I'm sure all of you, since we're in New Jersey, sometimes I'll give this presentation nationally. So, but the issue of Camden City is, one of the poorest cities of the nation. It's the neighborhood that I work in, the Waterfront South community of Camden, is sort of the poster child, or a poster child for environmental justice. Within Waterfront South, there's our wastewater treatment plant, which is the 3rd largest plant in the country. There is a trash and steam incinerator. There are 28 designated contaminated sites. There are 2 Superfund sites, all in 1 square mile. So there's a picture of our wastewater treatment plant. Again, it's 80 million gallon per day wastewater treatment plant. It services 500,000 customers. And if you just look in the northwest corner, you can't really see it, but if you look in the northwest corner, that's a residential community. So this very large wastewater treatment plant is only 100 yards away from a residential community of about 2,000 people. So obviously odors is a potential significant impact. And for many years, our wastewater treatment plant was probably the worst thing that happened to that community because of all the odor impacts. So, as I said, there were numerous odor complaints from neighboring residents. Also, we had a significant rate increase back in 1996, 22% increase. So, what did we do about it? The first thing we did was to change the institutional culture by implementing significant odor prevention measures. We closed the very odorous composting facility. I had more time. Do I have? No, I don't. I'm just kidding. Rhetorical question. I can tell you a story which would really be indicative of how people can mean well and not do the right thing. They put this very large wastewater treatment plant in. It was cleaning up the water. It made a significant impact on the water quality of the Delaware River. But people felt, engineers and well-meaning people, environmentalists really felt that the people who lived nearby it was almost like collateral damage because, of course, in doing this massive water quality improvement program, there's going to be some odors, and naturally people who live by are going to be impacted by it, but it's like almost like collateral damage was sort of their mindset. They really weren't evil, they just weren't thinking. We've installed over $50 million worth of odor control systems to minimize odors. We used to average about 4 odor violations a month, and we've only had 3 in the last 10 years since we put these odor control systems in. We also impose a zero tolerance policy with respect to odors. And we've also done some outreach. So, is that a happy ending that we had odor problems but spent $50 million to correct the odor problem? I would say no, because that, in a sense, doing no harm really should be, from a moral perspective, the floor of what you should aspire to, not the ceiling. So it wasn't a happy ending. It was really just a new beginning, a new opportunity. So odor prevention was a core priority in addition to water quality, and no longer the ceiling goal, but a floor goal. We now look for other opportunities to help the community. And we've implemented several initiatives. First of all, we implemented a host community benefit rate decrease for Camden City residents, recognizing that they're impacted by the wastewater treatment plant. There are 37 towns in Camden County, and the flow from the sewage from 36 of those 37 come to Camden City. So the Camden City residents deserve a lower rate. It's like a 35% decrease or discount for Camden City residents. We also worked with the city to eliminate truck traffic in residential communities. We created a waterfront park. We created a community tree nursery. We've, at our own expense, upgraded Camden City's combined sewer system, even though it's not our system, it's the city's, because they didn't have the funds for it. We've applied for federal grants for the city, not only in water quality, but even for things like their Eyes in the Sky camera program, because they don't have a grants writer. But we had the resources, so we've applied for grants for the city, again, not only in our own water quality, bailiwick, but for other grants as well. And we've also provided free technical assistance to the community as well, and we serve on their, they have a science advisory committee, and we provide assistance to that, either our own in-house or sometimes actually paying for consultants. More recently, we've tried to go even further, so that was for our own community. Is that a 3? Oh, good.
15, yeah.
15, even better. Well, I've just begun that. So basically, it was sort of an outward spiral. First, we wanted to do no harm by doing odor control. Second, we wanted to reach out to our community, which again is a significant environmental justice community because of all the metrics I gave you. Then we wanted to reach out further to the entire city and try to make as much of a positive difference as possible. So the first thing, and we did that, of course, and to do that, to go beyond our neighborhood, but also beyond our core mission of water quality, we needed to get partners. So the first partnership we formed was the Camden SMART program, which stands for Stormwater Management and Resource Training. I'm proud the collaborations among the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, the Tree Foundation, Rutgers, and 2 of my partners are here, Jeremiah Bergstrom, Rosanna De Silva, and also the Cooper's Ferry Partnership. And the goal is to reduce flooding citywide. The city has such poor infrastructure that almost every time it rains, there's sewage backups into the streets, parks, and homes of people. Like in a suburban municipality, people worry that if you're a parent and there's a rainstorm coming, you want to make sure that your kid has an umbrella and a raincoat. In Camden City, they have to worry that their kids may come into contact with feces if they go back out and play in the park after just a normal rainstorm, and that is just not right. So because of that, my partners and I, again, the DEP, Rutgers, the Tree Foundation, and the Coopers Ferry Partnership, are working with the city to reduce flooding. We've already installed 30 rain gardens, and the Tree Foundation has planted 1,000 trees, all which absorb water and reduce the potential for flooding. We worked with the city to develop for them a water conservation ordinance, which was adopted. We've replaced and rehabilitated the city's combined sewers at our own expense, and we've taken over the oversight of their operations and maintenance to ensure a better performance, more prompt performance to reduce the potential for flooding. After that, one last thing I'll say. We formed the Camden Collaborative Initiative, I think is a model for nearly, for any environmental justice community. It's a collaboration among the US EPA, again, the federal government, New Jersey DEP, the state government, ourselves, the city of Camden, and Coopers Ferry, a local nonprofit, to address six major environmental issues. Flooding, contaminated sites, air emissions, recycling, environmental justice, and environmental education. And basically we're functioning because the city, to try to supplement the city's resources, because they're resource strapped, and they have a lack of wherewithal. The idea is to act as if they had a Department of Environmental Concerns or environmental issues, these groups would act in that as that. So there's over 20 different partners, including the Nature Conservancy, the National Park Service, again, Rutgers, ourselves, all working together to try to deal with these flooding issues, contaminated sites issues, air emissions, recycling, environmental justice, and environmental education to try to improve the quality of life for the city and for its residents. Now, how much did all this cost? Did we have to raise rates? What's the cost of environmental justice? No, we didn't have to raise rates. In fact, our rates are -1. Okay, that's a hint. All right, I'm almost done. The point is that suburban people might say, well, why are you spending this money on helping Camden City and using our county-wide rate of dollars to do that? Well, first of all, it is a justice issue. It's an equity issue. But the bottom line is there's the cost. There was no cost. I mean, yes, there was a cost, but our projects were such that while they improved performance, we were also able to reduce our operating costs as well. So as a result, we were able to hold our rate and even offer a rate discount for the city residents, as I mentioned, and still hold the rate in the suburbs. Most initiatives not only improved environmental performance, but also reduced costs as well. So the point is not only should all water utilities in economic distress communities do this, they can do it if they're committed to do so. So I thank you for listening. Thanks for the extra minute.
And I just want to note that the water conservation ordinance that Camden passed was tremendous. It has a lot of the elements that Sustainable Jersey recommended as best practice for the rest of the state, and I would say the Camden version is the best one we've seen around the state. So, and if you're interested in learning more about that, there's a Sustainable Jersey webinar that we're doing with Green Faith on March 19th, and you can go to the Sustainable Jersey website if you're interested in more information about that. So, next speaker is Robert Spiegel from the Edison Wetlands Association.
I'll try to use the microphone, but usually I've never been accused of not speaking loud enough. I know. That's okay. I can tap dance too. My name is Bob Spiegel. I'm the executive director of the Edison Wetlands Association. The Edison Wetlands Association is a grassroots group, environmental group, and we began our work in 1989. We were working to preserve some open space in Edison, and Edison Wetlands is a little bit of a misnomer. But before I get into talking about environmental justice, I just want to recognize that there are a lot of people in the audience that are environmental justice heroes and people that have been working to make New Jersey and our planet a better place for a very long time. I see Peter Montague, I see Ann Barron in the back, Bill Schultz from the Raritan Riverkeeper, and others. And they have, you know, these folks are the models that we should be looking at for citizen activism and environmental justice. Okay, I brought with me today some free samples. I got to wear gloves for this because these areas are part of New Jersey, our garden state. This was the first site that I started working on. The site was in Edison. It was called the CIC site, and it had green rabbits from the chemicals. One of them was called Dynasec, which made the rabbits green and also killed a lot of McDonald's roll bakery workers next door. So they had to put these signs up on the streams of all the communities. However, the great news is, after much advocacy, the communities are clean. The site is now clean. It's now a public park because we bought it as open space. And it is something that shows that you can, in fact, clean up something that is contaminated. They used to make Agent Orange there, Agent White, Agent Blue, Agent Purple. Matter of fact, Molly Ivins, the late Molly Ivins, did a book called Bushwhacked, where she did a chapter on the green rabbits because of the story behind it. I'm going to talk a little bit about environmental justice, and hopefully you will engage us as the speakers with questions and discussion about environmental justice, because environmental justice it's a term that gets bantered around. People say, well, what is environmental justice? And it's the old adage, when you see it. Well, that's not entirely true. For a very long time, environmental justice was environmental just us. And it didn't really make the rounds. People didn't understand what it meant to live in a community where you were targeted because of the color of your skin, because of your beliefs, or because of your ethnicity. And we work in several environmental justice communities now in New Jersey, but there's many, many more that should have a designation and should have resources. The two I'm going to talk about today are Ringwood and Long Branch. And I see that Avery Grit is over here. He's the director of the Concerned Citizens Coalition in Long Branch. Thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate your input and all your hard work over the years. And also my brothers and sisters from Ringwood, which are the Ramapo Lenape Native American tribe, or nation really, and they have part of their families that live on top of a 500-acre Superfund site. Both of these communities we worked with, as well as many others, but they took a step that not many communities took, which was to apply to the state of New Jersey for an environmental justice petition to be designated as an environmental justice community. Now, a lot of people talk about environmental justice as though it's volunteer, like it's something that it would be good if people did. That's actually not factually correct. Environmental justice is not just an idea, okay? It is an executive order that was done 20 years ago today, or this last month. Executive order number 12898. President William Jefferson Clinton signed that order because he recognized that across the country, environmental justice and equity for poor communities fell far short of the vision that our founding fathers had with freedom and equity for everyone. So that order was signed into law 20 years ago, last February. This last month, I don't know if any of you had a chance to see it, but you can go online and go and look at President Obama's declaration making February Environmental Justice Month. So now the president went and felt that that was so important that it is now, alongside, I believe, with Black History Month is in February as well, it is Environmental Justice Month. And that is a critical step that the president recognized these shortfalls. However, I'm going to talk a little bit about these sites. I want to talk a little bit about compliance and enforcement, because how do you get environmental justice? Obviously, if you ask for it, we all know that asking sometimes will get you some results. Trying to prove a case sometimes gets you results. However, compliance and enforcement are tools that are now in place in the federal government for environmental justice. Many people don't even recognize or understand that just recently the US EPA put together a compliance and enforcement plan EJ 2014, which it's integral, they say, to the 20th anniversary, to the programs and policies marking the 20th anniversary of Executive Order 12898 on environmental justice, to protect the environment, to empower communities, establish partnerships with local, state, tribal, and federal governments and organizations to achieve healthy and sustainable communities. Okay? They also have an enforcement tool, which most people aren't even aware of, advancing environmental justice through compliance and enforcement. Okay? The difference between the communities in Ringwood and the communities in Long Branch are that in Ringwood, we worked on an environmental justice petition, which was granted. However, the community was sidetracked by the promise of litigation, and they did not follow through with an action plan. In Long Branch, we worked with the Concerned Citizens Coalition. They developed an action plan. The DEP enacted that action plan. They gave them about $200,000 in resources to address the things that were laid out in that action plan. So today, you know, Ringwood is still without an action plan. The state and the federal government are trying to decide if they're going to let Ford's toxic poison sludge remain in Ringwood State Park and the iron mines of Ringwood and the Ramapo Lenape families, or are they going to encapsulate it forever? In Long Branch, we were very successful in working with the community because the community took action. And they worked very hard and very collaboratively with us. They got a lot of work done. We not only cleaned up a large section of Troutman's Creek and the community, but we're addressing as many of the issues as the community has, and we work it on a monthly basis. We actually still do monthly calls many years after that designation. So while there are a lot of problems with the environmental justice in this state and in this country, there are many, many new tools and some old ones that communities can bring to bear, because it's not a voluntary program, and it's only when the communities fight, when they work collaboratively with other groups, and when they demand environmental justice that they'll get it. And this right here, believe it or not, is toxic peat sludge. This is something that I bring with me when I talk about environmental justice, because I can't really touch this or open it. If I did, it would smell just like solvent, peat. Because this was some Bob DeGroat's backyard in Upper Ringwood. He was one of the Ramapo Lenape families, and he happened to be unfortunate enough to have his home built on top of 15 feet of toxic paint sludge. But if you want to look at it afterwards, I can give you a pair of gloves. I just wouldn't recommend opening it. And that area now is cleaned up. The residential areas up there, because of the work that we do, are now fully clean and safe. And there have been a lot of successes because of the work that we've done up there in Long Branch. We still have a lot more to do, but we can't do it without partnerships, without collaboration, and without support from everybody here and many, many more people that we need to bring into this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and with that, I'd like to ask the panelists to come back up, and we will open it up for some Q&A. If anyone has any, what's that? Sure, yeah, I think she's fair game. So if anyone has questions for Anna also, you can ask her as well. Yes. So.
This is for Dr. Sheets. Dr. Sheets,
And could you introduce yourself? Oh, you're about to, okay.
Yeah, I will.
And use the mics for the...
I practiced environmental law for over 25 years, and it took a trip to Nicaragua and a discussion with a Peace Corps volunteer there to awaken me to the dangers of particulate pollution, particularly from smoke, wood smoke. And I wondered if you do any work along those lines, because I noticed that wood smoke is becoming a more popular heating source among some naive people who think it's a green energy source.
So we don't do, I know that wood smoke international is a huge issue. We haven't done it domestically as an EJ issue yet. If you're telling me we should, let's talk. But usually in the urban areas that we work with, because of all the polluting facilities, that's more of a kind of low-hanging fruit than like burning wood stove. Actually, it's interesting you bring that up, though. I'm on the Clean Air Council in Jersey, and other people on the council, not EJ, I'm the only EJ person on the council, have brought it up for that it's getting to be more of an issue in the suburbs, because people are getting more, I don't even know what, but I guess they're using that more for heating now.
Yeah.
So, it may be something we have to start looking at, but right now, it's not, in the United States, not characterized.
I can tell you when I approached my mayor and council about this, the mayor actually opposed me. He said he liked the smell of wood smoke.
You would be shocked at how much, when they do a particular matter budget, overall amount of particular matter, how much comes from burning. Burning, get leaves, wood, just, what the heck are they burning? Right, what are they burning? But yeah, just open burning like that, it's amazing.
It goes on 16 hours a day for multiple sources in the neighborhood.
So if you think that's an EJ issue, let's talk.
I'm glad to talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah, afterward?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Charlie Crowdesville. I'm the editor of New Brunswick Today, newspaper we're really proud of. And I wanted to ask about all the natural gas infrastructure that's being, forced on our state. And I also wanted to just make a quick point that I was the only person who raised my hand, I think, when they asked if anybody was a journalist. And I think that this is a great event. I'm really glad so many people are here. And I think more people need to think of themselves as journalists because we've been able to, just a couple weeks ago, there was a pipeline that exploded in the Raritan River and was shooting natural gas into the air. Some of you might have seen it. It's the river between here and Highland Park. And, somebody was in the right place at the right time and got some video of it. And now tens of thousands of people have watched that video, and we have a story that no one else has. And I think that, you don't need to have a newspaper to be a journalist. You can have a Facebook page and you can take a good picture, you can ask for the right documents or ask the right questions at your council meeting and make a real difference, because a lot of the problems with EJ issues are where people are cutting corners because nobody's watching. So even if you might not have an organized newspaper like I'm involved in, I think that everyone can make a difference by at least acting like a journalist or thinking like a journalist. And I wanted to ask specifically about the natural gas infrastructure, the old stuff that's failing us now. And I know there's a tragedy in Ewing Township as well, where somebody lost their life due to the natural gas infrastructure causing a fire and explosion. But also all the new pipelines that are being pushed, and all the new natural gas power plants, 2 in Middlesex County and 1 in the Ironbound. I wanted to ask, what is the way forward for people who care about these issues to protect our communities from this?
Okay. The point that you make is an excellent point regarding media, and especially with the advent of the iPhone, everybody can be a citizen journalist. We have iPhones now that take excellent video, excellent stills, and most people are writing now more than ever and actually reporting more events from the public than ever before. So we've started our own environmental blog. We've helped to develop websites, but you're absolutely right. Every single person that cares about justice and equity and human rights, environmental justice is plain and simple. It's human rights. Everybody has the right to breathe clean air, live in clean area, drink clean water. And citizen journalism is how it's going to happen, by everybody becoming a citizen journalist and doing, everybody has the potential to be a great journalist. They just have to try.
Anyone else on the panel want to address any other aspect of that question?
on the natural gas front, I know in the Ironbound, we have the 650 megawatt natural gas power plant that's being developed. I know there's one also in Woodbridge, right? And it's also being built or has been already started. And we really got a lot of folks together in alliances that had never worked together before, making the connections between the Marcellus Shale and fracking and the pipeline in Jersey City and all throughout our state, and where it ends up in our backyards in a power plant and then out to the national grid. So that's really important, is creating that narrative so people understand that it's not just in Pennsylvania or in New York, that, you know, that industry affects us everywhere in this state, and we need to think about it because, you know, we're on different places along that line, either consuming it or having it, you know, piped through our communities. And there's environmental justice issues all along that process. So the more, like you said, you can highlight it as a community, it's not just a story in that one little community. I think the more we can make the linkages, how this community ties to all the other communities that are getting impacted down the line. And I got to tell you, it was really powerful to have at those hearings people that were impacted by the Marcellus Shales, where it was getting fracked and is not going to be sent to that facility in Newark, and having people all along that line testify and say, we don't want this plant because you're going to produce a 30-year demand. There's a plant that's going to be around for 30, 40, 50 years, you know, pumping out energy based on this very dirty fuel source. So.
And to add to that, you know, the companies, the one that you're referring to is in the Keesby section of Woodbridge is being constructed. And we're involved with the restoration of the wetlands that were part of that old brownfield area. So we're working on that project. We're not directly involved, obviously, with one end of it, which is the redevelopment, because we originally had worked on trying to clean up this whole region with 660 acres, and the town decided that that was what they wanted to promote in there instead of warehousing. However, we talked to the companies that were doing the redevelopment, that were actually doing the strategic planning for putting in the power plant. And when I questioned them about whether or not we could bring in natural gas that was from non-fracked sources, they were telling us, well, we're not sure, we don't know. And I said, well, haven't you, you know, you're going to get a lot of people coming up against, coming out against this project because they're against fracking. And they said, well, if we start to hear a lot of feedback from the community, if they start, you know, calling us, you know, then we would consider it. But the company, they said, has essentially not really received many calls from community members that were concerned about fracking as an issue. And I was kind of surprised either, you know, that he wasn't telling me the truth, or that he wasn't, you know, people weren't adamantly calling the power companies on that issue when it comes to natural gas generation.
Hey, Bob, can I ask you a question? I don't know if I'm supposed to ask questions. Can I ask you a question?
Well, you got 1 minute.
Do you know, what are the demographics of that community? Do you know offhand?
That community actually is a very small demographic of residential area. There's probably about 10 homes that are within a mile of that site. It's mostly former industrial, it's 660 acres. Right now, there's 7 toxic waste sites that we're cleaning up simultaneously. That's why it's a brownfield development area, because we chose to do a regional approach to try to clean up all these radioactive toxic waste sites that were all leaking into the Raritan River. So as part of that, the township designated redeveloper for one part of one of the sites, and they you know, decided that that's what they wanted in the community. You know, it's a very big project, and so, you know, we had to pick battles that we could actually fight, and getting the 7 responsible parties to actually clean up radioactive toxic waste that's over 660 acres was a massive undertaking. So while I'm not happy about the gas plant, there's not a lot of residential folks that live in the area. Across the river, there's probably a lot more in Sayreville. I'm not sure which way the wind patterns go, but I'm sure that it's going to impact residents. It's just the area where it's at is mostly former industrial and business.
And,
This one right here, why don't you make a comment on the natural gas issue in particular?
I just want to bring up New Jersey One call and making residents, as well as industry and most of all construction, aware of New Jersey One call's requirement. On a personal level, I planted a tree, I called New Jersey One call, my lawn was marked up with everything but my own town sewer that said, I'll hold your water, and it's a straight line, don't worry about it, don't put it there. The utility lines are very shallow. They're in residential communities. They're 3 and 4 feet below. That's your gas, your electric, your telephone, and people in construction often subcontract. They have no awareness that they may be hitting the gas line because most of the accidents have been are not on new construction and plants, but have been existing in construction.
Oh, anybody that knows Edison probably remembers the big Texas Eastern pipeline explosion, and that was not far from where our farm is. And that same pipeline runs through our farm and through the back of it, and they had a problem with the pipe. Their little mouse ping. So they had it coming through our farm, through the wetlands, through the streams, with unbelievable amount of equipment, and destroyed so much to be able to even get to that pipeline. And then they had to divert a brook and to replace a section of it. So, I saw both the explosion aspect of it, but also just for them to even do any kind of maintenance on it was absolutely unbelievable, the amount of effort that has to go into maintaining it.
And what we talked mostly about, we didn't talk a lot about the infrastructure, but as Anna was getting at, and we commented, Ironbound and the Alliance, I guess, 2 EJ organizations that commented on the Energy Master Plan for New Jersey, which calls for more natural gas, is they didn't pay any attention to the communities, where it was extracted, so they didn't talk about fracking. They acknowledged, actually, in the Energy Master Plan that natural gas was going to come from fracking, basically, but they didn't say anything about what it was going to do to those communities there. And they didn't say anything about where the power plants were going to be sited on this end, which, again, siting is an environmental justice issue. And one thing that when you hear about natural gas, they will say it's cleaner, and it is cleaner than coal, but it still puts out hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds of local air pollution every year. And nobody generally talks about that either.
What's the most toxic of those pollutants?
No. Well, carbon dioxide, now remember, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, but it's not actually toxic in most cases. Particulate matter is probably the most toxic.
Particulate, she said?
Particulate matter, yeah.
And
But
I just wanna
VOCs, HAPs. I'm sorry, go ahead.
A few years ago, prior to better information about the impact of fracking becoming more publicly known, there were a lot, the environmental community was pushing hard to phase in natural gas as a remedy to coal, which is the most toxic of the fuels. The issue, though, with when you think of energy is that none of our energy sources, except for solar, really, are good. So if you look at New Jersey's electricity, 50% of it comes from nuclear. All that spent nuclear fuel, for the most part, is stored on site in New Jersey because we don't have any long-term solution for it.
Every plant.
What's that?
Every plant in the United States.
Every plant in the United States. So we have a lot of nuclear in New Jersey. And then the rest of it comes from coal. Most of the rest of it comes from coal. A small amount of it comes from renewables, about 10%. And so a lot of our mobile sources of fuel, gasoline, has a tremendous environmental cost. And of course, talk about environmental justice issues, the wars that we fight, the amount of environmental degradation, the poverty that a lot of what we see around the world is driven by our appetite for gasoline. And then when you look at coal mining and coal extraction and the environmental justice issues, and when you look at the treatment of the miners and those communities, as well as the environmental calamity that's happening sort of in Appalachia and other places, there's no good answer. And so, although I'm not going to say that people should be for natural gas, but I'd say what really people should be for is solar, getting rid of all fossil fuels, energy efficiency,
With a plan to get there.
and thinking about the next generation of energy sources, because none of those answers are really any better or any worse, frankly, in my opinion.
By the way, it's not true
So-
that coal is the dirtiest fuel. Wood is much dirtier.
I stand corrected. Although wood's not a fossil fuel, so there's some issues there.
That's why you want the forest to hold earth.
Yeah.
that is.
I would like to also add that I would like to see people, both on the panel and in the audience, use and force the issue that the EPA has in their Environmental Justice Plan 2014. These are new tools. They were just put out. And what makes them different is that they are enforcement and compliance. And what it says, essentially, in a nutshell, that every federal agency, every one, is subject to these regulations, and the EPA is the lead agency for the enforcement. But that environmental justice has to be one of the leading considerations in every decision that the federal and state government makes when doing any type of permitting or facility or cleanup, and that has to be paramount. Now, why is that important? Well, when Superfund sites are cleaned up, for example, many of you know what Superfund is, that they have criteria for cleaning sites up. One of them isn't environmental justice, but according to EPA's plan, and this is one that actually has teeth from the Department of Justice, environmental justice should be the #1 concern when you're cleaning up a toxic waste site, when you're citing a facility, when you're talking about things that are injuring people and taking away their right to clean air, clean water, and a healthy place to raise their children. So you should go online, you should look at the EPA's website under environmental justice, and once they put this up, by the way, the state took their website down the next day and changed it. They took down everything they had about environmental justice, and they put up a brand new website because they were, I guess, afraid of being called to task on this compliance and enforcement through environmental justice, because they said they weren't accepting any more environmental justice petitions, and they can't do that. So now their website is, if you go back on and look at environmental justice on the DEP website, it's a different website.
Just a word of caution about, and I'm glad EPA put out EJ Plan 2014, and I actually sit on the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council now, but they're going to have to prove to me that they're
Exactly.
serious.
But that's the thing is, we have to force their hand.
Right, we're going to, exactly.
We're gonna have to force
We
their
got to
hand.
stay on them. It looks nice on paper, but let's see if they're really going to do that. And they could have a problem legally, because even though we have EJ executive order, you can't sue under that. And, there hasn't been, well, I shouldn't say no case, but very, very few cases decided based on environmental justice concerns.
Right,
So
but
they're
the
gonna have
compliance
to
and
prove it to
enforcement
us.
aspect of this, you should read, because they added this just recently, because they recognize exactly what you were saying. There was no teeth to the environmental justice executive order. They added this section for compliance and enforcement and actually laid out branches of government that were going to be responsible, what rules and laws they can use. And you're right, that's why we have to put it to the test.
Okay, let's keep it moving. Yes, question right there.
I just have a statement and wanted to address a few things that were brought up. My name is Lynn Dansker, and I'm an independent associate of a renewable energy company. And the production of electricity through coal is more polluting to the environment than all the cars and trucks on the road put together. So when I was listening to you speak about diversity and the problems that the poor community or the communities of color have, really kind of no voice. The truth is that anyone who pays an electricity bill has a choice of where they can buy their electricity from. And so, as you stated, in the state of New Jersey, the Board of Public Utilities has asked that the public utility offer you 10% renewable energy, and that goes up to 20% in the year 2020 because that's the federal government's mandate. But as a third-party supplier, you can offer more renewable energy, and the company that I represent, and I'm not just plugging my company, I'm just trying to explain that the company company that I represent takes 50% and adds it to that 10%, so that you're actually buying a 60% renewable energy product and you are saving money over time. And it's free to make that choice. So now, if you live in a poor community and you pay your electricity bill, you can just by making that choice have a major impact on the environment. And that,
Although I just want, and that's a great point, thank you. And it's true that in New Jersey, anyone at any time can go buy green energy from the supplier of their choice, and lots of people have done that, more should. Although I would say if you're in a poor community, it would be sort of ironic that you would have to subsidize everyone else's clean air when the power is getting generated far and wide. But nonetheless, that's something that could be done. So, yes, right here.
Father, and if you take a stand against a natural gas-fired power plant, do you do any research as to the size of a solar field that would have to be created, or how many windmills or anything like that to offer an alternative?
Actually, Peter probably in the audience can help us with that. He testified exactly to that point at the hearing, at the Hess hearing, about the amount of renewable energy and energy efficiency that could be done to replace, or even the improvement, just energy efficiency and improving the transmission lines efficiency would negate the need for a new power plant. So there was a lot of debate whether the power plants were even needed. And that wasn't just a local debate, that was a national debate that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission was having. And you know, we used it too, because we looked at, it's not just a NIMBY argument, we don't want it in our backyard. We're, we are taking a long view of it as, why do we continue to build an infrastructure that fuels this, alternative, and will force us into that, and continues the same patterns that the coal plant is just down the road in Jersey City. The natural gas plant is in the same very densely populated area of the state, and so we just continue to ask those questions. And also from an economic side, we made a lot of arguments around the labor issues, which were this power plant will employ 20 people. It's like a $1 billion project. It will employ 20 people. I mean, it'll employ lots of construction jobs in the short term, but in the long term, the amount of jobs that could potentially come from, manufacturing and placing and maintaining solar or wind could be a lot more powerful and potent for a place like Newark that needs economic stimulus. So we tried those tacks as well, and I think the city of Newark also at some point tried that, but it was one of those deals in New Jersey that, by the time the public part of the process, the deal was 90% baked already, and the financing for the deal was baked. So it was difficult to fight on just a sort of making the rational arguments case against it.
What we're trying to also do is, in my neck of the woods, we're lucky in Lower Raritan, as Bill knows, they call it the Valley of the Dumps, because we have so many dumps. And lucky, I mean, there's the area, but had those landfills. Those landfills are also opportunities, because in addition to them being the only remaining space in the densely populated central New Jersey, there are opportunities for, while they're being cleaned up, for habitat creation, for passive recreation. And also what we're doing is we're trying to incorporate solar into the landfills, because every one of the state's 800 landfills that we have that are supposedly closed landfills, that they essentially are looking to redevelop. They're looking at all the landfills, all the former industrial sites. These 800 landfills could all be converted to generate solar power as well as passive recreation, and that's what we're doing in our neck of the woods down in the Lower Raritan River. We have 4 landfills, and I think every single one of them is going to end up having some solar on it as well as some passive recreation.
But let me say this, and I'm just speaking for myself now, but here's the point that I've gotten to anyway. As environmental justice advocates, we don't want to pollute anybody, right? I mean, and we've taken stands against that, like with climate change. I won't go into it, but we took very principled stands that we don't want to necessarily shift the pollution elsewhere. But I got to say, I am so frustrated. And when it came to the power plant in Ironbound. You know, Ironbound to recognize EJ community, disproportionate impacts, DEP says that. We argued, Dr. Montague made the arguments, you don't need it, right? First line of defense. But then for me, at least, you know, I'm ready to make the argument and did, especially when I look at the graph I put up there. And that graph makes me mad. It starts making me, I'm getting mad now. It makes me mad every time I see it. That you get to the point where you say, okay, if you are intent on putting that plant, on having the plant, you think you need it, you gotta put it somewhere else but in EJ communities.
Princeton.
You know, yeah, right. Go try to put it in Princeton. And I'm starting to think
I know
that
a guy.
that may be the solution to our entire environmental problem. Because once you say start to try to put that in Princeton or Short Hills, then maybe we'll come up with a way to cut the pollution for everybody.
Oh, yeah, you could guarantee it would be pollution-free.
And I say, you know, we really don't want to pollute anybody, but when you look at that graph and you see the communities on the left-hand side that have money, that are mostly white, and they have very little pollution or a lot less pollution, and you look at this graph and you're like, on the right-hand side, is the Ironbound the only place they can put, you know?
Apparently so.
Yeah, what's going on? And so at this point, we're frustrated, and you really have to say, you know, other communities, if this is a public good, and the Ironbound is being sacrificed almost for the public good, you know, for a regional basis. Other communities have to have their fair share, but maybe that will make it better for all of us.
But if you're choosing renewable energy as your source and you are making that choice, then the need for power plants is going to be reduced.
It's going to be reduced, but still, 20%.
What we need is a plan that the public can be educated on, and the schools, we have to start younger and younger and teaching the kids about what it is important, that energy is important, conservation of energy is important, that use of energy is important, but also, you know, what the impact is of their choices and their parents' choices, because there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect from the average person and the average family in New Jersey and environmental justice or environmental equity, because people do not see the consequences of their actions. They're not taught in school about the consequences. We do a lot of environmental education at our farm, and we had 1,150 third graders there last spring, and we had an opportunity to talk to so many diverse students and their families and parents, and people are disconnected from the environment. They're disconnected from the choices that are made. They don't even know where their food comes from. And that means that we have to take time to educate people about that, and we have to make it a part of the solution. Is not just advocacy, it's not just, you know, litigation, it's not one thing. There should be a plan in place to eliminate environmental justice in our lifetime. But it's got to be inclusive, and it has to include, as much as I used to just think advocacy was enough, education is key, because once we can get across to the families and children the consequences of the actions that are being done, nobody would knowingly poison somebody because they live in the wrong zip code. No, you know, and no family should have to die or lose a child because they live in the wrong zip code. So.
And I'll just say that the energy usage of an average low-income family in the Ironbound is dramatically lower than somebody utilizing energy in a mega mansion, you know, in the suburbs who don't live next door to the power plant. So I would say that message for green energy should be taking to the masses who are the most energy intensive, which tends to be the wealthier communities that don't bear the brunt of the burden of it.
But we also agree with you.
Let's try to get one more question in. So who had their hand up the longest?
I'd tell you all 5 of them.
Give you 2 more questions.
Right there. You get the last word.
I have 2 comments to make. I'm from Long Branch and we're concerned with remediation of the gas plant site. But there are a couple of things that we should think about, because we have community groups here. We had no money, we had no technology, and we ran into groups like Edison Wetlands who provide all kinds of technical assistance. Peter Montague wrote our petition. We had the manpower to make the streets, you know, and the Alliance introduced us to a lot of groups. So you who are community groups, reach out to these organizations. They can help you. The other thing is you talk about renewable energy, it's good, but we need to educate our people. I was the city engineer of East Orange. We were shipping garbage to Pennsylvania, to here, there, and the tipping fees were going up New York and sending it down to South America. When they said they were going to build the incinerator in Newark, I jumped up like this, okay? Because that was the solution. So we've got to find out and urge the citizens to go to the government and say, we've got to push renewable energy or anything else to find a solution. But right now, what do you do with your garbage? You got to burn it, you know. So we need advocacy, and that's the only thing that happened. And right now, New Jersey is not an environmentally friendly state. They killed our petition. We used to sit at the table and we made decisions. They provided us, like you said, $200,000 in DEP's budget. So that anything we needed, it didn't come to us, but it went to the staff. If we said we'd like an investigation here or that, give us an analysis of what this report is about, they did that. Governor McGreevey was an outstanding environmentalist. Lisa Jackson and Brad Campbell, they came to front and said, look, this is what you're going to do, and we were very successful in Long Branch. The gas company did not pollute it. They bought a polluted land. But they were very ethical. New Jersey Natural Gas is very ethical. They do a lot of community work. But they have to protect their investors too. And it was a multi-million-dollar process. And we also sued them. 292 people shared about, I guess, $30 million in torts. But again, that was also done by lawyers who stepped forward and said, we can help you. So we need advocacy.
Thank you for that comment, and I would love to have the conversation go on a lot longer. There's obviously more to talk about, but unfortunately we are out of time. So please join me in thanking the panelists for an excellent discussion.
Can I just add one thing? We just started a website, I forgot to mention, ejtoolkit.org, and we are putting up some advocacy tools and other resources to help with environmental justice fights throughout the state and beyond. So if you get a chance, check it out. If you have any feedback, you have anything you think would enhance it, we would love to hear from you. ejtoolkit.org is the website.
Great. Thank you all so much for coming, and thanks to the Citizens Campaign for organizing this.
You should come by and visit my farm. In Lady Gladys.